Are South Africa's electricity tariffs fair, or have they driven us straight into crisis? Today we sit down with Tommy Diedericks and unpack three crucial issues. Firstly, the complexity and chaos around the 2025 to 2026 tariff increases. Then, the social and economic impact of relentless increases, as well as the deterioration of infrastructure that threatens both businesses and communities alike. Stick around, because what we reveal in the next few minutes could change your view of your electricity bill. If we have a look at what we're seeing in the municipal tariff increases, how does that compare to Eskom's own pricing versus the municipals?
What happened with the municipalities is they historically applied for tariffs and it departed from the Eskom way. Again, municipalities and Eskom, unfortunately, have budget-based tariffs, but the municipal tariffs, they might have changed their time of use times to be in line with Eskom's, but that's more or less where the similarities stop. It's one of those things, if you don't understand how and what you're paying for, it's very difficult to make a change and to say, you know what, I've got control over X, Y, and Z, and I can save on X, Y, and Z. And all of the tariffs in the country makes that really, really difficult. And there's quite a big difference between the Eskom tariffs and the municipal tariffs, both in structure, but also in pricing.
I think the price gap is just getting to a point where, landlords are buying power for more than what they can actually sell it for. So talk about complexity, but it's rather the chaos which is taking place. I mean, 1,300 plus tariffs. How can NERSA, our national energy regulator, realistically regulate this and what's going on and keep things fair across the board?
Yeah, honestly, again, they can't. When I sent them my objections against the latest tariff increases, one of the things that they just ignored and that they definitely didn't answer was show us the impact on each individual customer base. And they couldn't do that. So it's a very clear indication of tariffs are all over the show. And each municipality is its own little freelance agent that can do whatever they want. And there's no public hearings. There's no voice of the guy on the street that says, you know what, this is unaffordable. So NERSA can't control, and they're not. They're rubber stamping and they're saying that they're doing this. But 2 meetings and a few objection letters to ignore is not a system. A system is when they really look at the cost of electricity for each individual on that tariff thing. And even that, to compare 1,300 tariffs and to truly understand each tariff, it's a monumental task.
Absolutely. I think between a lack of oversight and knowledge, that's where these things are going astray. But why don't you take us through what some of these actually look like on the ground when comparing?
Okay, so I did a comparison, and this is all I wanted NERSA to do. This is what I wanted them to focus on. I only took a few interesting customer bases that would be mostly for the landlord. But I mean, obviously, NERSA also needs to look at households. They need to look at everything. Absolutely. Interestingly enough, what we need to understand is, what do municipalities pay for their electricity? Well, they basically pay on a megaflex the cheapest rate for electricity to Eskom, even cheaper than some of the largest energy consumers in the country. So that's why if you look at the end of the graph, the Munich cost is always level. That was around about R1.80. So the municipalities, for every electricity kilowatt hour you consume from the municipality, they were paying around about R1.80 for that kilowatt hour, depending on their notified maximum demand and so on. But it's a very fair assumption of more or less what they would pay. In some instances, maybe even slightly less if they a metro with very high connections and close to large power stations. But if you look at small businesses, each one of these lines are a different municipality and Eskom here. But you can see there that small business were paying over R4. Unfortunately, this graph here was as part of my hearings against the current increases. So this is now increased with City Power with 18% and so on. So some of these guys are now paying over R5 a kilowatt hour. And you can see that the municipality is paying R1.80, but your consumer, your business is paying R5.
It's extremely concerning. And we also compared 44 municipalities. And like you say, there's no rationality or consistency across the board, which is extremely scary.
Yeah.
But I think, looking at this, what would the broader social economic impact be of this kind of volatility in the tariffs?
As you know, I do some work for for example, like KFC, but often we do it for owner that owns not the entire KFC, but 20 or 30 or whatever KFCs. And one of the questions they ask me is, where should I put my next drive-through, or where do I need to go and put my business? Or I have industrial customers phoning me and saying, you know what, I want to expand and I'm looking for new premises. Where should I put it? And the cost of electricity is really one of the fundamental factors in deciding this. So the social impact is business is not opening because of cost of electricity. And if businesses are not opening, there's no growth. And some of the business can't afford the current electricity, so they just end up closing. So the impact of this is very direct, very real. And when I was at the NERSA hearings, UMFA was there as well. And you've got this union that is all the way on my side. And I can tell you without a shadow of the doubt, if an expert from the steel industry and the union is on the same page, somebody's messing up. One of the things that people need to understand, which is of such importance, is at your house, if you save any electricity, you switch off lights or you take colder showers or whatever the case might be, you have the ability to save certain electricity. Now, everybody has the ability to save electricity. But if you are a manufacturer, like a steel industry, unfortunately, the energy consumption is directly related to the output. So in other words, you've got a kilowatt hours per ton of steel produced. So if they consume less energy, they produce less steel. So we can't live in a world where all of a sudden that is the thing that we're expecting of people, to use less electricity, because we're basically asking them to make less products, and that's just not economically viable.
Well, I mean, we've spoken previously about the utilities debt spiral. You've warned about the deteriorating infrastructure and the risk of collapse. How bad is it really? I know you've been on site, you've been at these hearings. What is the situation really like?
What we're seeing on the ground currently is what I refer to as microgrid collapse. So in other words, everybody around you has electricity, but you don't. For example, in one of the Gauteng municipalities, we had customers now that just after the COVID pandemic, all of a sudden were hit with a 21 days without any, or 24 days without any electricity, because a lack of maintenance. If you looked at the service book that the municipality filled in, they're like, we were on site, no tools, can't do any service. And then eventually they're like, service needs to be done imminently or it will burn down. And the next minute it burned down. So the second thing that I think I want to add on to there is that what we're seeing more and more is a runaway theft. And I'm not talking about a little bit of electricity being stolen. I'm talking about a substantial portion of the country's electricity being stolen, either deliberately by large portions of certain places that are not paying for energy, that's not paying for electricity. And there's this continuous moving line where if person A says, you know what, person B is not paying, therefore I'm not paying, you've got this line that constantly moves until it's, when is it my turn not to pay? And we get more and more people not paying for energy.
Your business is constantly evolving, and your utilities management should pivot with it. UMFA, the sponsor of today's video, has utility management specialists to help you identify opportunities, eliminate inefficiencies, and boost profitability across your portfolio. Take action and book a strategic session with one of their specialists available nationwide, and discover how their tailored approach can turn utilities data into actionable insights. Besides the theft and the maintenance issues and the deterioration of the infrastructure, how do the legal connections play a part for municipalities and equipment that Eskom has, and can it even handle these kind of issues?
Illegal connections is one of those things that we need to get under control. Again, I understand if somebody didn't have service delivery or they were promised electricity that they're not getting. They have the right, everybody has the right to energy, to have light, for their kids to be able to do their homework under light, to be able to make food and so on. But rampant theft without any control is where these own communities are detrimental to themselves. So let me give you a great example. I was called to a consumer in Garankuwa, and some of the things I saw, they were horrendous to say the least. And they explained the immense amount of steps they've taken to try and stop cable theft and to try and keep the electricity on. The manager said, hey, let's take a drive and let me go and show you. We were driving on a Wednesday around about 10 o'clock in the morning, and there are literally people just stealing electricity in the middle of the day and digging up cables and so on. And there's no stopping this. And unfortunately, the Eskom guys, you can blame them, but if they try and do anything, their lives are at risk. And we need people that can really take this under control, because if we allow electricity theft, it's just a runaway train that we can't bring back to the station. But I saw how these guys then literally just closed. So you've got all of the businesses that were there that end up closing because they don't have electricity. They get backups, but the panels get stolen from the roof, or the diesel gets stolen out of the generator. And because the desire for electricity and the reliance on electricity has gotten to such a level where people absolutely believe they've got the right to unlimited electricity, and they've got the right to use as much as they want, as long as they want it, because they need it and they want it and they've got the right to it. And all the businesses close, and eventually that community is at an horrendous place. There's no more jobs there. And then Eskom stops because there's no income in that area. They stop maintaining the transformers. The transformers get heavily overloaded. And eventually that same community in 3 years, 5 years from now on is going to have no energy, no jobs, and basically destroy that entire township because nobody took control and said enough is enough. Now, I know this is not an easy thing, because there's literally people that will kill you if you try them from taking free electricity.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've seen Eskom vehicles being stoned, staff members being beaten near to death, trying to curb these illegal connections. And there's nobody that lives in South Africa, in some of the greater metropolitans and outlying areas, that doesn't see this on a daily basis. Now, and I fully agree, people need to be able to have a means for education, cooking stuff, but it comes with a right real risk. The deterioration gets to the point where it's no longer cost effective or viable to reinstate that infrastructure. And I think that's a big issue.
I wish that this would have stopped at a certain point, but unfortunately the municipalities are not putting in the time and money in the current infrastructure. So what's happening is the infrastructure is failing at a rapid rate, and we're seeing a lot of municipalities where having no electricity for 3 weeks to a month is normal, but it's in industrial areas. So in other words, somebody can't produce something for almost a month. Do you know what happens if you take away production of a customer for an entire month? They still need to pay all the salaries, but they can't sell any products. I mean, these are things that need attention now. The municipalities are so worried about their budgets and so on, and they are really throwing away money, and they're not looking at the cost of energy. And if you look at the cost of energy and you say, how much are we spending? What must we do on maintenance? And make sure that we spend that, and our people that work for us are trained and so on and so forth, and we don't do tender corruption and throw money away and not let people pay and have this broken system. Really make a turnaround and say, you know what? All energy in this country should be metered and should be paid. Even if it's free, it should and metered accurately. Because if you go to these municipalities, some of them are reporting losses of more than half the energy. So, I mean, that is, they have basically wanted half the customers to pay for all the energy. Now the cost is too much, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, they're in Section 139 and they are under administration and they owe Eskom money. That's how Eskom is owed over 100 billion rand. We have a deteriorating infrastructure, and we have people that losing their jobs because of the cost of energy. And it's possible to turn around, but the taps must be closed. And the way municipalities have got free access to spend money on themselves and on things that doesn't impact the working class, that doesn't impact the guy on the street, just to line their own pocket, that needs to be stopped at an astronomical rate. And that's where the army and the police and the hawks and all of that attention needs to be on there. Unfortunately, we just lost another auditor in this week in Ekurhuleni that was trying to expose certain corruption, and they just went and killed him because it's easy money. And I think that is the best way we can control it, is to take away the easy money. And if we can start putting the money in the right places, I think things can start to improve at an astronomical rate.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to tune in next week where we discuss renewables as well as Tommy's opinion on a single national tariff structure. We also dive into service delivery and accountability. Until next week, stay informed, stay efficient, and stay empowered.